Hi, everyone. So excited to be here today with my good friends, Beverly Glazer, and my special guest for the day, Charles Caldwell. Charles actually reminded me that Charles had been on a show with Beverly back in December, so it's not our first time together. And I'm such a big fan of both Beverly and Charles for what they do, and more importantly, what they help other people do. And with that said, the word of the day is limitations, and always open to questions, comments, thoughts from the audience. Really keeps us more relevant and provides quality takeaways. I'll start with Beverly. Beverly can give us a quick update and initial thoughts on limitations, and then we'll switch right over to Charles. Beverly.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm encouraging everybody who's listening. Um, you're welcome to comment in the chat. And if not, we're still happy that you're listening. And we're going to be talking about limitations on all kinds of levels. And the first thought, since you asked me, Dawn, was I'm taking a look at Charles's backdrop, and sky is the limit, or goes up to the moon. Okay, stardust. Think of that, because this is what we're talking about today. What limitations are you putting on yourself? And for those of us, those of you who follow me, I'm Beverly Glazer, and I help high performing women achieve success in business that they know they do deserve. And this is all about the limitations that we put on ourselves. And it doesn't matter how much you've achieved, you always set your own restrictions. And this is what my clients are all about. And I'm only too happy to share information with you. So you're the only one that knows what restrictions you're putting on yourself. So I'm encouraging you to think of what we're saying, think of how you can apply all this to you. And I really am excited that Charles is here today to join me. He's got so much information to share with you about limitations and just about everything else, and for a whole Eastern perspective as well. Um, and so, Charles, I'm passing this on to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Beverly. Very excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Donald, and for letting me join. A week out before the times change, and it'll be really hard to join from that point on. But I love that word, limitations. I think that as humans, we're putting limitations on ourselves all the time. And I love what David Bowie writes in his poetry, tomorrow belongs to those who can hear it coming. And lots of people are very familiar with the concept of destiny, is that destiny is not a matter of chance, but it's a matter of choice. And it's not a thing to be waited for, it's a thing to be achieved. And really hope that over the course of the next hour, as we're talking about limitations, that people will be able to see the limitations that they put on themselves, or the limitations that the environment puts on themselves and or places on us, and how we can get released from those limitations.
Yeah, great way to start a show. I love the word limitations because it really is something that I believe most people place on themselves as opposed to what is placed on them. So it's a lot to do with mindset, it's a lot to do with attitude. And I think to everybody's benefit, it is about taking initiative, being proactive, testing to see if there are true limitations and how you can resolve them and work through them and actually use them as a benefit to a better future ahead. So, Beverly, I know you work with so many interesting clients. How do you address limitations?
Um, I don't address them. It's that easy. They address them. And the interesting thing is, they don't think of it as a when someone comes to me, they don't necessarily have a specific problem. Yes, of course, I serve people with problems, and that's on a specific level. But when I'm talking to people who are really high performers. They know, they have the tools, they know what to do. The problem is what's stopping them. And that's where the limitations come in. So that nobody says, what's stopping me, right? Nobody says that, like, because they all know what they have to do. But when you ask the question, how come you want this, or whatever it is that they are particularly addressing, and you ask the question, and if you ask the right question, and you keep on asking, it's that curiosity to bring out that other person to realize that, oh, that's what's stopping me. And we don't know, because we all think with our own mindset, as you were saying, Charles, our thoughts are the ones that direct us. So when we're just talking, and I mean, just without really even a specific agenda, and something will come out. You could talk about this with friends. You don't have to go, to people that come to me. People that come to me, Dawn, are achievers, and anybody that knows that you are on you're a successful person. You're supposed to know it all, right? You're supposed to have it all together, right? And so how can you be vulnerable? That's the thing. Okay. So you have to be selective. This is something that I do on the back end with people. This is not about therapy. Everyone is okay. And even in therapy, okay, they have to, change a lot of different things, but I don't deal with that, nor will psychiatrists do. The bottom line is really the feeling that I can express myself, I can get out what I'm actually feeling, and I can actually see, because we all know that I am capable. And that is the limitation. That is where we're going beyond. That's where we start reaching the sky. And then my clients, like I said, high achievers, they're going to just do it. And I'm aghast. I said, wow, we just talked about this. And then, whoa, we put it into action. It's about the action. So as soon as you kind of get it, as soon as it connects in your head, you're going to do it. But before it actually connects, you know what you have to do. But then you're thinking, and your mindset is going, and you're thinking of all kinds of different ways and perhaps not to do it. Or is that right? You could have your meetings and you could talk about this till the end of time. But the bottom line is, that's what needs to be done. And when you get that, boom. So I just love your backdrop, Charles, particularly on this. Okay, I am mesmerized. Okay, when I said boom, it's like, yes, I so mean that. Okay.
Well, Charles, what's your new thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that the question that you asked Beverly in terms of how does she go through that with her clients or with people when she's looking at limitations, and she's saying she doesn't do it, they do it. So I echo that. I agree with that. But so what is it that I would say that people go through when they're looking at limitations? So I would say it's a bit like what I call, and people will be familiar with this, the iceberg model. That an iceberg or an ice cube, if you look in your drink or if you're having an iced latte this morning, look at the ice cube, and most of that ice cube is underwater and only a little bit of that ice is above the water. Same with icebergs, a little bit of the iceberg's above the water, but most of the iceberg is below the water. And what we can see are the behaviors, the things around us in our environment, the conversations we have with other people, the easy to pinpoint items, behaviors, and things that we say. But that's what we know that we know. But what we don't know that we don't know are the things that are below the waterline, the things that are the parts of the ice cube or the iceberg that are hidden from us. And that would be an area of inquiry for me. I'd be asking people questions that would have them be looking at what's below the water. So what are the things that influence them in their lives? What lenses do they have? What filters do they have about how they listen and speak to people? What assumptions do they have about how people operate in the world, how people relate to them? What kind of beliefs do they have about the world around them that will be, in a way, placing limitations on people, and having them go through an inquiry on what's that piece of the iceberg that they can't see. What are all those assumptions, those beliefs, those things that are in their blind spot that they can't see, and unearth those things in the blind spot, put light onto them, pull them out from the dark into the light, get them above water so you can actually look at them, and then you know what you're dealing with. And then people often have an aha, and they say to themselves, wow, aha, I didn't see that about myself before. And that insight will usually cause them to move into action in some
Exactly.
way, or you can then have a conversation with them about action. Yeah. So
Exactly.
there's three kinds of people in the world: those who don't know and don't know that they don't know, and the ones that don't know that they don't know are the ones that are constantly in the inquiry. But the people who don't, the people who don't know that they don't know, and they don't know that, are the ones that aren't in the inquiry. And the key thing is to get in the inquiry about what you don't know that you don't know, and unearth all those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
What you've just said, both Beverly and Charles. Go ahead, Beverly.
I just so agree with you there because, I said it, you said it different, but basically it's exactly the same thing. Ask why. And, ask yourself why. And then when you have your reason, ask why again and keep asking why. And I tell my clients this all the time because I do this too. Like, why? Like, what is there research on that? Is this what you have actually thought about, or did somebody tell you? Who told you? Where did this come from? Did it come from your mother? Did it come from your past? Did it come from your education? Did you come from something else? Like, why? And once you drill down, just like Charles said, you'll come to the self, you'll come to who you are. And often is, well, there's no reason for that. And what that is your aha. That is like, well, if there's no reason for that, then the sky's the limit. I can do it. And that's just such a marvelous perception to have. It's so uplifting. So that's really really what Charles said, really what I'm saying. And just, sometimes when you're listening to people's conversation, whatever you get from whatever matters to you is your aha moment. So keep asking yourself why, like why? Just like that 3-year-old kid, why? Until finally, you say to that child, it's enough. That's why. It's like, but drill right down, okay?
Yeah.
And you'll get it. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Dawn, your turn.
Oh, no, 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 never. You always do better than you think. And I think, what we're talking about relates to awareness, self awareness, as well as the feedback you get from others around you. And I think that's where curiosity and asking questions makes a lot of sense because life is a journey, right? And it goes in different ways at different times. And you just have to keep readjusting your compass to where you need to go and sometimes recalibrate. And I think shows like this are so important because it gives people a view into other people's thoughts about subjects that may be relative and consistent or something you've been missing as far as a piece. But I see we've got a large group of individuals in the audience. Carrie's here. Why did the squirrel go to the library to check out a book, How to Crack Nuts?
Oh,
Kelly,
sure.
Kelly's here. Kelly's
Hey,
always here.
Kelly.
Hey,
Even in
Kelly.
spirit, she's been instrumental in helping this show become what it is and is here for the last 21 months of Thursdays every week. So I have to congratulate Kelly for being consistent. And the beauty of learning together, growing together, sharing together is the spirit of collaboration and being able to ratchet each other up where we might not have been able to without each other. Charles reinforces his comment. Tomorrow belongs to those who can hear it coming. David Bowie. And I have to give Charles credit is I believe Charles was instrumental in the word of the day back back in the old day of saying, why don't we have that? And it's been real since we adopted that one practice. and made such a difference in really focus and being able to come back to something. Jason is here. Good morning to all. Wishing everybody a wonderful week. Jason will be with Kelly on Thursday. Can't wait. Charles says people not only don't know what's happening to them, they don't even know that they don't know. Noam Chomsky.
Yeah.
Great quote. Charles is also a instrumental individual who helps in education and has had a storied career in other industries and is just a real renaissance gentleman. When you become comfortable with uncertainty, infinite possibilities open up in your life. Eckhart Tolle, I read his book, and it's all about being in the present and the now. And it's a worthwhile book. I suggest to anybody who's interested in it. So, moving to Beverly.
Okay, my very next thought was, I hope your screen is going to be okay because you froze on mine. So that was my very next thought. Okay. But I was getting back to limitations, that sometimes the limitations are not what we set for ourselves. And since on Tuesdays we're talking about women empowerment as well, women in the workplace often have limitations that are put on them just by being women. And I'm saying that quite openly and very forthright. There is such a thing as a glass ceiling. And there is such a thing, and I've seen that many times with glass ceilings and women that come to me and they have the feeling that, and it's not just a feeling, that they're overlooked in the boardroom. And it's not a feeling. They know it. They're extremely uncomfortable. And what do you do when you have achieved really the job and the position and the respect that you always wanted, and then something there is holding you back? I'm talking about a glass ceiling on a high level, but you can get that on many levels. And I know we have many people listening here that perhaps can't relate to a lot of people that are clients of mine, but you can always identify with yourself. And are you being held back just by your gender? And what are you going to do about that? And it doesn't really matter if it's your race, it's your gender, whatever it is, you're being held back. And how are you going to take a look at that? Now, some people fight it. Some people will be very resentful for it. How do you navigate that? This is really up to you. It really is. And I'm thinking of particular clients that I have, and often they have decided that they are going to change positions. I'm thinking of one CFO who just said, this is a real man's world and I'm in it, and I'm in finance, and you know what Toronto is like, and Hong Kong over there, don't even mention it. Okay. It's like, if it's finance and you're a woman, do you have to try harder? Well, maybe not. It doesn't even matter how hard you've tried. And I'm going to also put this out there. The Forbes 100 most successful women happen to be 80% of those women are over 55, 60, 70 plus. And recruiters do not send women to companies for advancement when they're over 55. They're considered too old. So just think of the ageism out there. Just think of all these really successful women. The 100 Forbes list, okay, over 55. And if you're struggling to reach that, whatever your top is, you're being held back because you're not even going to be sent for jobs. That's out there. That's in the media right now. So we know what we're up against, and particularly older women, we have to fight hard. So those limitations, let's get rid of that. we're capable, we're strong, we can do it. And we don't die at 65 anymore. We go on to 100. So we replace body parts. So let's keep going, guys and girls. Let's change what's going on with our thinking, with our mindset. Who is important? What do we know? It has nothing to do with the limitations of the person. It has to do with what you have to fight up against. And so, if you have.
And was working for a Canadian darling company, actually, a brand that was in the marketplace is well respected and well known throughout Canada. But what she went through really shocked me. And I just thought, there's something wrong that we've come this far on the planet and we have this level of technology and sophistication, and yet in our mindsets, we've still are struggling with diversity and equity and inclusion. And right now, what we're seeing on the planet is companies are, for sure, ESG is getting pushed to the back, and ESG in some parts of the world is starting to get politicized, and people are passing laws which are easily to interpret they're anti-ESG. And now the same thing is happening with DEI, that people, and what that looks like for DEI is people are weaponizing DEI. And this is going to be a very odd two-step dance, because on the one hand, the weaponization puts people on guard, and there's a step forward, but then the weaponization puts a step back, and it's bad enough as it is with these limitations of the glass ceiling. Now, I do think that the research shows that we've made huge strides, and in the future we won't have female leaders. We're just going to have leaders, because there will be so much inclusion. You won't say male, female. You won't need to keep track of your diversity mix and things like that.
Exactly.
And the research is telling us now that the type of context that the global workforce is in needs empathy and needs nurturing. And those are, sorry guys, but those are characteristics that more naturally come to women than they do to men. And the research is bearing that out. And I don't have those statistics on the top of my head right now, but I know if you Google it, you're going to find out that the leaders who have broken through that glass ceiling, Beverly, are demonstrating exceptional leadership, and they're being written about and in really positive and encouraging ways. And they're role models for everybody else. So the context that we're in right now is that we all need to embrace empathetic leadership. It doesn't mean that you don't have straight talk and difficult conversations. All good leaders will know that, male or female. But there's a higher propensity for more nurturing leadership, empathetic style on the women's side compared to the men's side. And I think this will help this will help inclusion, this will help the glass ceiling. But again, going back to my friend, I was really shocked at what she had encountered. Now,
Exactly.
Some of us in the HR world think that there's been overcorrection on DEI, which has caused the weaponization. And I think if you go into Asia, you've got a different type of dynamic going on, which is creating its own glass ceiling, and you've got Confucian values and the way males and females are respected differently within Asian cultures, and so on. But in terms of the one thing that Asia does have going for it is that there's a much higher tolerance for diversity, and there's a much higher natural propensity for inclusion, because people are coexisting in different cultures. And because of that, you are seeing a different cut on inclusion in Asian markets and territories compared to what you might see where it's a little bit more blatant, kind of less gray area. There's more gray areas, I think, in Asia. So that means that some Asian companies are making more positive steps forward in this particular area compared to what you might be seeing in more Western countries. But it's still a struggle. It's still there, and it's real. Yeah. And it creates a limitation. So you got to, again, it's easy to make up a narrative about that limitation and place that narrative on yourself. And then it doesn't matter what the limitations are. You got the limitation on yourself, and you got to get rid of that iceberg.
Mhm.
Melt
That's
the
right.
ice, but not the Antarctic cap.
Yeah,
Well, those are great
exactly.
thoughts. And what it brings to mind is the differences that are happening today that weren't happening before. And because it is a global, connected world now,
Mhm.
one of the bigger changes is what's real and what isn't. What's meant for good intention and what's meant for not so good intention. And the messaging is so consistently there. You can't escape it as soon as you enter the internet, or especially social media. You're getting hit from all sides for different reasons. And there's pluses and minuses to change. The key is keeping up with it and staying ahead of it as far as what you can do to help yourself and help others, because there are portions and areas that you can go into that are going to be very valuable, and there's areas you'll walk into that are going to be somewhat destructive. And pretty soon you form your self image and your propensity to do well, based on, again, attitude and mindset that's affected by so many different forces. The other positive thing I'd like to bring to the table is that you don't have to go through gatekeepers like you used to. A lot of things you can go directly with. Before, if you wanted to publish a book, you need a publisher, an agent, I mean, a whole bunch. And only few could get access, or it had a lot to do with geography. If you lived in New York, you were in a better position than if you lived in Nebraska. So access is more available now. Knowledge is more prevalent now. You can go to Google, YouTube, get conversational about pretty much any subject in about a half an hour, and build your resume for yourself. I always tell people who aren't doing what they felt they should do is hire yourself and start the company with you as the way you wanted it, and then build from there. It's always better to be the inviter than the invitee, because things don't always happen as fast. And a lot of times you end up taking potluck or whatever's available, and that could really take you off of your journey. Kelly loves the book um, that you mentioned, uh, by Eckhart Tolle. Uh, Charles comes back with, I love Charles because we get two for the price of one. We get a
I
short
was
book.
going to say, we got comments, and when the comments are good.
So we get a twofer whenever we bring Carl on the show. And Carl mentions the term glass ceiling refers to the sometimes invisible barrier to success that many women come up against in their careers. Management consultant Marilyn Loden coined the phrase almost 40 years ago, but says it is still as relevant as ever. That's a wonderful contribution, because the other thing that's important is context. How do you compare it to something? How do you relate to it? And that has a lot to do with how you view limitations. And there's people, Helen Keller comes to mind, who had so many limitations, real physical limitations. But because of her attitude, because of her mindset, she was able to overcome them and be one of the most celebrated women who ever lived. So, Beverly, great place for you to take it away.
You both said such wonderful things. Yeah, and I'm just engrossed in everything you've been saying. Um, it's so true. We've always had people break whatever ceilings were there, and the world is changing, and it's changing for a good thing. I mean, when we're just talking about it, look at where we are just talking right now to whoever is out there, from so many different places in the world. You're in the East, and I'm in the East, but in North America, and then you're right down there, Central, more or less. There, we're on the West, but it's wonderful because we have now different mindsets from different people, different cultures. We're more open today. Um, and we can learn from everybody. I'm always going back to the why. What is it all about? And so I'm going back again to the why. When you're up against a glass ceiling, or when you're hit by something that you do not know where to turn. It's your wall. Doesn't matter whether it's glass or concrete, it's your wall. And when you are hit, you have to go back to your own values. Why am I here? Like, what's it really about? What is this? What am I doing? Because we can get caught up in our busy lives so easily. And I'm thinking of a client who was working for the World Health Organization. You know what that is. And she was on an extremely high level. She was always into caring and always into mental health and always working for others. She was in her 40s, and her mentor happened to have been 57. And she had just come off a tremendously wonderful lecture where there were accolades everywhere. And this woman came back to the office, and then she was called in and she was dismissed. It was her birthday that was coming up and she had to be dismissed. Well, this was the wake-up call for my client, who loved her job, but she had problems at home. She was going through a difficult marriage. Not only was her marriage, she had a child that happened to have mental health problems. And she was handling it all. And it was really burnout, but she didn't want to burn out, right? She was holding on, because that is very often what women do. Women have to be all things to all people. And if you're still a mother, you have to take care of your kid and you have work to do. You have to have your job. But when this woman, who she really admired and respected, was let go, that's when she said, what am I doing here? What am I working for? She was 10 years younger, and she just looked at this. And that's where she took this break, and she never went back and went into her own, as you said, Dawn, entrepreneurship, where now she is in her 50s and she has this wonderful company, and it's becoming very diverse throughout America, and it's helping others in mental health. But sometimes you have to get this wake-up call to say, what am I doing? I'm here for my children. I'm here for my family. Yes, I'm here for the world and I'm here to help others. But what is this all about? What are my values? And if I'm going to be let go, and I'm on top of my game, and I'm going to be let go only because of my age, why am I here? So you have to have this wake-up call somewhere. And it doesn't have to be in an organization. Wherever you are, there's this wake-up call that has to be, hey, why did I hit this wall? What's it all about? Maybe that can be the best wake-up call you ever had in your life, because you can change your life. And your life can go with the values that you want for yourself, for your family, for your life. And it may take a different direction, a direction that you never thought you'd ever go into. But you will be surprised. Life can be a very interesting journey. So when I was thinking of what you just said, entrepreneurship or something else, but a wake-up call there, because you're putting all your life into the job and into other people's lives. And what's it for you? That's what matters. It's your value. That's what you wake up in the morning for. So another TED Talk.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, very good. So I think that that is just bad management and leadership to fire somebody on their birthday. That's
Imagine.
just, yeah, I mean, you can't make that stuff up, right? It's just really terrible. So worst company of the year award goes to that company, whoever they were. They can remain nameless at the moment. But that wake-up call, I would call that wake-up call a defining moment. Whether or not it's, regardless of what gender or what background you have, anybody going through that type of situation is going to have a wake-up call, and that wake-up call is a defining moment. Now, I shift from wake-up call to defining moment, because in those moments when you're waking up, you're going to make some decisions that are going to invent and create a narrative. And it's in that moment that you risk having limitations placed on you. And if you're not careful about something like losing your job and then you come up with a negative narrative, that negative narrative could exist for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or a couple of years, or maybe even for the rest of your life. And you need to be really, really careful about that. And being in HR, there are lots of times when I've had friends or acquaintances or or colleagues who they lose their jobs, and the first thing that they do is they call me because I'm in HR and they're panicked. What do I do? And quite often they have a lot of legal questions, and they're worried about their package that they got and should they call a lawyer and et cetera, et cetera. So they call me up, and one of the things I say to them before I answer any questions that they have, I affirm with them, it may not look like this now, but this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. This is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. It may not look like this now. I know you're upset. I know you're crying. I know you're traumatized. I know you're mad. I know you're angry. I know you're in shock. You're not feeling anything. But this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And hold on to that. And hold on to that narrative. And I've had friends who've gone on, and just like you, Beverly, how you described, one individual very early on in my career, when that phrase came up, he went on and he had invented a very, very successful business, also in Canada, and has been very, very successful. His wife also was inspired to start her business, which was a dream career for her. She never thought she could do that, but she broke out of corporate Canada and came up with an amazing company and was extremely successful. And I've had people that have left huge corporate jobs. They've had massive redundancy, and then they've walked into really high impact jobs where they're giving back to the world, working in charities that are really making a meaningful impact. And they look back now, 5, 10, 15 years after the event where, they were fired on their birthday or something equivalent happened. And they think to themselves, wow, that was just so important to have that positive narrative and to watch out for that defining moment, because that defining moment there's so much of a risk that's when you're going to create the narrative that's going to limit you and lock you down and become part of that iceberg below the water, and you won't know.
Yeah, these are wonderful thoughts and insights because I'll agree with all of it, especially in relationship to some of your biggest disappointments create some of your best opportunities. And some people are strong enough to keep going through a lot of resistance, a lot of challenges. And a lot of people are afraid to communicate openly and honestly with the people they're working for or the people they're working with. So a lot of things shouldn't have been as much of a surprise because you're putting your future in so many other people's hands. And that's why I've always worked for myself since I was 15, and I knew whatever I did, I'd take responsibility and be accountable for, but I never had to worry about someone being fickle one day or being in a bad mood or deciding to take it out on somebody. And that's counterproductive for everybody. And again, like Charles said, at the time you don't see it, you just feel it, and what you feel is raw and it's a surprise. And people have egos, people have images that they project, and all of a sudden something just, hey, you were who you were based on what you were doing, not really who you are. And all of a sudden, if you're not that, you lose your identity, and that's something. But we've got some great comments from
Yeah.
Christine here. Christine says women are often expected to shoulder a disproportionate amount of caregiving responsibilities, which can impact their career trajectory. This can lead to career interruptions, reduced work hours, or perceived lack of commitment to the workplace, all of which can slow career advancement. Kelly comes back with your crushing it with your pep talk today, Beverly. I
Thank you.
agree, but it's not just today. It's pretty much always. Christine comes back with, I witnessed a woman get fired on her birthday. I watched from the window as she walked to her car carrying a box of her belongings and a balloon that the company gave her.
Oh,
Quite a sight.
Oh,
That balloon was not necessary.
oh,
Charles comes back with, in your life's defining moments, there are two choices. You either step forward into faith and power, or you step backward into fear. James Arthur Ray. And then, with that said, Beverly, what do you have to say?
I'm listening. I will ask why. Okay. Okay. I always go back to that. Okay. So, what do I have to say? I also have to go right back to saying you have to know yourself. And so it's not only about your values, it's always about your values, but it's not only your values. It's like, where do you feel uncomfortable? And that is your limitation. Okay. So I'm just thinking of a client that I'm going to be speaking to on Friday. And no one would know that she hates speaking in public. And that is one of our biggest fears. I think it is the biggest fear of speaking. Um, I think it's above death. Okay. That's how much people hate standing up. And she said, I often have to do this and I know I have to do it and I can do it. But is there a way that I could do it with ease? And that's what we were talking about actually, Dawn, when we just started this. It's to get right down to, yes, you can do it with ease. You have the techniques, you have the theory, you can go out there, you can do it. And she knows she can, but she doesn't want to have this anxiety. She doesn't want to have this fear that I'm going to muck it up. And I'll tell you right now, as soon as you have that fear that I'm going to muck it up, you're giving yourself the fear. This is all mindset. And this is how you go beyond your limitations. When you think of any sport, are you going to think that I'm going to break my leg if I go skiing? If you think about that, you're setting yourself up. Okay. But if you say, oh, I'm going to love it here, I'm going to go down that mountain, I'm going to really enjoy myself, you put yourself in a different mindset. It's your mind, it's your thinking, it's everything that you are thinking, you are actually creating. So, what she was doing is saying, yes, I have to do this, I have to talk among these people, and I want to nail it. I know what to say. That's your head talking. I know what to say. Okay. I have the theory. I know I can stand in front of the mic. I know I can do a PowerPoint presentation. I can do that. It looks like I'm nailing it, but I hate this. Okay. So that's the stuff that doesn't have to be. That's the stuff that people come to me for, actually. But in her case, she says, do you see, can you do that? And I said, yes, absolutely, I can. She says, please, on Friday. Well, I could do that in a few minutes. We don't need our whole session with that. The bottom line is we are the ones that determine how far we are going. And unless, of course, we're hit by some block. And as Charles said, we can make that into something very creative. But at the time that you're hit, it hurts, it's painful. But once you start changing your mindset and getting the help, and I'm going back to that, it's the ego here, talk to people. Talk to other people. Go to people like Charles. He would see many, many different stories from many, many different perceptions. Talk to people like myself. I'm always open to conversation. By the way, Reinvent Impossible, and that's what I do.com. But that's the kind of thing that you have to be able to do. Don't let the ego get in your way. That's a limitation because we all feel, I can't. And when we say I can't, you can't. You are putting yourself in the exact place of can't. And that's a limitation. So let's go back to the why. Why can't you? And who told you that? And when did you learn that? And maybe you did fail. And so does that mean you're going to fail again? Keep asking yourself that question, self-inquiry, and you will break through the limitations that are self-imposed. So it doesn't matter whether it's a glass ceiling, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be even a relationship. Why am I going through this agony? Is it working for me? Is this, can I do better? You know, do I need to lose sleep overnight over this? Stuff like this. Question yourself. It's all about inquiry. We keep ourselves stuck, and that's a limitation.
Great thought. Charles.
Yeah, I think that what I would want to add to that is we're talking about um, defining moments. And when we've also talked about, you mentioned it earlier in the live session, Beverly, is the importance of personal values. And, we all have defining moments and we have events that create defining moments. And the question is whether or not that moment will define you or you will define the moment. And it really makes a difference that you have personal values, that you have a life
Mhm.
vision, that you have somewhat of a life plan, you know, a map of where you're going in the world, where you want to get to. Because when these moments happen, you can be steering off your personal values and your personal vision and your life plan. And you can decide, okay, am I on course or off course? And how does this event define me? Because I want to backpedal a little bit. I want to say, are they really defining moments? Because if you really had strong values and strong goals and a strong vision, then nothing can define you. Nothing can define you. Instead, they're not defining moments, they're refining moments. And when these events happen, for better or worse, when these life events happen, you're constantly refining yourself, you're constantly learning. A success or a failure, as you say, Beverly, you're just constantly refining your life and growing from that particular point. So I think that we have defining moments and refining moments in one's life where we learn about ourselves, and then we take that knowledge and we deposit into our experience account so that we can draw on it again at some later date. So yeah, I think it's important to have the values so that those defining moments become refining moments, and you can draw on them at a future date. Back to you, Don.
Yeah, well, thank you for putting this in perspective in a way I really appreciate and understand, and will take away some wonderful comments and actually put them into action. I think in the context of limitation or limitations, we should appreciate that you're better off working with and on your strengths at times and allowing yourself to accept certain things that you're not that interested in, you haven't been that excited by. And I think that's really the key, is find out what you're good at, find out what you're passionate about, and take that energy and thought, and you'll have a tailwind working on your behalf instead of a headwind. And a lot of times I think being defined by others is unfair to yourself, because what do they know? Are you going to trust a poll of one, before you substitute what you believe? And I think that's why having support makes so much has so much value. And the other thing is, don't have all your eggs in one basket. You know, don't let one career situation affect the rest of your life, because then you have a different place to go to. And sometimes, people are built with neutral and reverse gears. Sometimes it makes sense to just pause, maybe take some time off. People go right from the frying pan into the fire sometimes. They've been working so hard for so long, and then they get disappointed. Why not take a month or two or whatever you need, or do things you just enjoy doing? Everything is about staying healthy, keeping healthy in all parts of your world, and being grateful goes a long way. Too many people keep looking up instead of where they came from, or looking down to see where everybody else may be playing. And what is priorities to you? Is it a increase in pay, a bigger title, more responsibility? Or are you grounded and humble, and work with humility? And that can go a long way. So there's so many ways to improve oneself, but the more important thing is not to lose yourself because of situations. And I think values are important. That's saying there's certain things I wouldn't do for money. Well, the question is, when have you ever been tested? Right? I wouldn't do that for $1 million. Well, if a person put $1 million up, would you do it? And maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But those are good questions. So, Beverly.
Yes. Well, I'm I'm thinking of now playing the devil's advocate because we've really pushed limitations to the limit. So limitations can also help us. It can push us. We can start pushing our determination just because you said, it can drive us. It can really be a motivator for us. And when I'm thinking of my podcast with these wonderful women, because I each and every one of them, the stories are amazing. Aging with purpose and passion, by the way. Okay. As we age, let me tell you, and they're women, and they've been beat down on many, many, many different levels. And what happens is you're pushed beyond your limitation. You don't even think of the limitation. It's like, I have to do this. I must do this. And then once you've accomplished it, it's like, oh my goodness. And then you can go farther. And this is exactly what happens. I'm thinking of your iceberg model there, Charles, where you're not going back to the I can'ts. It's like, I'm here now. Now, how do I get from here to there? And I've heard stories of women, literally, she lost her house. I mean, there's so many. She lost her house. She lost her marriage. She had absolutely, positively nothing. She took the money from her car because she knew I couldn't do anything about that. And she decided to hitchhike across America. And you say, what? And this was, she's now, I think, in her 70s. This is when she was in her 50s. And you say, how did you do that? Wasn't that dangerous? Well, what she did, of course, she did write a book. And of course, like a lot of people write a book, but she completely changed her life, not only from the book, but started to understand her disabilities as a child by talking to other people, and started to teach and lecture and help and create, because she was extremely creative. She was creating now children's books. This is way after she did this travel across America to her son, who was across the country. And what happened is she's now a speaker. She, at one time, like I said, she didn't have a job, she didn't have a dime. And all she said is, what do I have? Not what don't I have? What do I have? And even with nothing, and I mean nothing, she created a something. So what it says to me is we're all a something. And we have to stop the limitations that we put upon ourselves, because that's all it is. It's our own limitations. And let me tell you, everybody has a story. And that's when I listen to these stories, it's like I'm in awe. And I say, you think I have a story? No, 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 no. Okay. And that's a whole other thing. Everybody has a story. And so when you listen to other people's stories, it empowers you too. So no limitations. It's all up here. And let's just melt that ice, And when we're right on that very top, well, boom, go right into the universe, right? Exactly where Charles is. I have to get that backdrop. I love it. Charles, back to you.
Yeah, so sticking with your playing the devil's advocate and embracing limitations, great idea. So one of the ways we can do that is by practicing radical acceptance. So instead of fighting against limitations or feeling frustrated, we can actually practice accepting them fully. And we can acknowledge a current situation without judgment, even by applying gratefulness to the situation.
Yeah.
And in that situation, we can often find some really unexpected paths forward. So that's one thing to do. lots of people create vision boards and life boards and that kind of thing. And you can actually create a limitations board similar to a vision board. You create a visual representation of your limitations, and then you actively brainstorm creative solutions or counteractions or different things like that for each one. And this can make the limitations feel more tangible and for more manageable. And you can also experiment with extreme challenges. This is something that's pretty topical right now, extreme events. So make sure you're doing it with a trained professional, but you can really take on a completely unrelated challenge like climbing a mountain or learning an instrument or any kind of challenge, and to build your confidence and resilience and really to face your fear. If you have a fear of heights, then take on bungee jumping or something like that, and overcome a physical or mental challenge can really shift your perspective on other limitations. You can also engage in contradictions, embrace the idea that you can hold contradictory beliefs. I'm not good at public speaking, but I can learn to improve, and this can help break down rigidity of limitations. And lots of people have a fear of failure. That's a topic for on its own for an entire week, probably, Don. But participating in a failure celebration and host an event where you and friends and family can share stories of failure and what you learned from them. It's such a great idea and could be such a positive learning environment. But we're so shy to talk about our failures. And this, again, is one of the ways that people can embrace and own limitations and break through those limitations and melt the ice, as we've been saying throughout the call. So these are all different ways you can normalize setbacks and encourage a more resilient mindset. Back to you, Don.
Well, those are wonderful comments. This has been a tremendously valuable show for myself, and I'm hoping for others. What I want to bring to kind of put a top on the subject is sense of humor. And that'll go a long way. There's things I'm limited. I know I'm not very good at because I've proven it time after time, but I still have fun doing it. But I don't have the expected. How many people enter these races, right? Marathons, and they come in last, but they had a wonderful time. Why? Because they're out in the sun, they're exercising. I got a couple grandkids, and I love watching them play soccer or basketball. And I said, listen, just enjoy having friends around you, running around. If you're lucky enough to score or help somebody score, that's a feather in your hat. But just enjoy being there and participating. How many people play golf and they have one bad hole, they throw their clubs in the water, they break them in two, they get all excited, and it really makes it worse instead of better. And it's the little things done right over time that can compound into bigger things and do those little steps that are comfortable. People start lifting weight and all of a sudden they get way too heavy too early and they're competing with themselves. And pretty soon, 3 days later, this isn't fun. This is hard. Well, who made it hard? And it wouldn't it be better if you stuck with something long enough to conquer it? And I think perseverance goes a long way. Is the first you're sitting in the sun and all of a sudden the clouds and the rain come are going to run away. Is that enough to take you off your game? And I think everybody has to appreciate everybody else is dealing with these same situations in different ways in different areas. And I think understanding that, appreciating that, and there isn't anything wrong with complimenting somebody on just trying, not on succeeding, not what place did you come in, how much did you make, but hey, I give you credit. You got into something that wasn't comfortable and you learned from it and you're a kinder person to yourself. And I think that's where you need to be during a lot of adversity and people who place limitations on you is accepting that, hey, there's tomorrow. And if I couldn't do it today, maybe I could do it tomorrow. Maybe I'll find something better to do. And that allowed you to take a road that allowed you to pivot. And without that first road, you would have never got on your main road. So I think hope and the belief in, having faith and the knowledge that, hey, it wasn't like this before. It became like this. It will change again if I allow it to. But if you tie it down and say, this is it, well, that's the end of the game, right? You got to add up the score and do what you want with it. But with that said, we're at time. I want to thank Beverly. I want to thank Charles. I want to thank the lovely audience who's been so supportive, and we wouldn't be here today without it. And I want to share that Charles will be back tomorrow with Carl. We're taking full advantage of the free time zone to get Charles in before it turns to 12 o'clock at night instead of 11. And Beverly can never thank her enough. And that's why
Thank
we'll
you.
be doing these shows, because together we're so much better. And I think I proved it today. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.